Welcome in to the Mile High Hoops podcast. He is Anilo Piro. I am Jake Shapiro, and we are talking to you on a Monday, December 1st. We are already more than a month into the NBA schedule, about 6 weeks in. In fact, we're actually at like the quarter pole. I need to actually do the math on everything. But Thursday's show, we might do a quarter pole. A little more overarching thing of what's going on in the NBA. But for now, I wanted to talk about Tim Hardaway as well as the NBA Cup and what we've learned about the Nuggets in the last couple weeks, especially since we haven't talked to you since last Monday. And a couple things have happened with the Nuggets since last Monday. The Nuggets went home in NBA Cup, which we'll get to at the end of the show. And Tim Hardaway Jr. on Saturday had one of the best games by a Denver Nuggets bench player. End of sentence. You'd think I would say something else, but I didn't. That's how good it was. And Anilo, I will start you with just this. How many times in the Nikola Jokic era do you think a Denver Nuggets player off the bench has hit 7 threes like Tim Hardaway Jr. did or more on Saturday?
Off the bench in the Jokic era. I'm going to go 3.
A little bit more than you think, but it is just 4 names. It's Will Barton, Tim Hardaway Jr. on Saturday, Bones Highland, and Austin Rivers. That is the entire group of players who have hit 7 threes off the bench for the Nuggets in the Jokic era. And if you look at just within the last 2 years, Hardaway Jr.'s already had 2 different times where he scored 5 or more threes off the bench for the Denver Nuggets, right? He had that big game early on this season. We talked about this a little bit. How many times in the last 2 years do you think a Denver Nuggets player has had 5 threes or more off the bench?
In the last handful of years?
Last 2 years.
Last 2 years? 7.
3. It's just 2 Tim Hardaway Jr.'s and the 1 Julian Strawther game against the Thunder. Yep, that's it. So, I really think that the shooting of Tim Hardaway Jr. has changed the Nuggets significantly, and it's not being talked about enough.
Yeah, I mean, I forget the exact moment, but he had another game where he had an offensive explosion already earlier this season. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is frankly just living up to the billing of what Nuggets fans expected from him. I mean, you and I, Jake, have talked time and time again about this is a guy that was playing starter minutes last season for the Detroit Pistons and, opts to come to Denver, likely to contend for a championship. And with that, takes a little bit of a back seat with respect to his role compared to what it was last year. But you're looking at this 130-112 Phoenix Suns victory, and Tim Hardaway Jr. was absolutely nails, a +10 in the box plus minus, 27 minutes played, 23 points, 7 of 11 from 3 and 8 of 14 from the field. And so it's a great thing to see that Tim Hardaway Jr. is meshing with this team. And frankly, especially after that loss of the San Antonio Spurs, that's what the Nuggets need, especially being down Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown at the moment.
Yeah, and you're saying backseat. At the same exact moment, you finish that sentence with, he's been elevated from that backseat. And granted, maybe not in terms of being a starter, because Spencer Jones has been spectacular, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But Tim Hardaway Jr. has given them, an elevation in his pecking order, as I like to say on this podcast. He's getting more responsibility. And the thing I've loved about Tim is we talked about with them losing Michael Porter Jr., they were going to lose their best shooter and one of their best rebounders. Well, the rebounding has quickly been replaced by Jonas Valanciunas. We've covered that. I talked about that going into the season. And we figured that the three-point shooting was mostly going to get covered by Cameron Johnson. I almost see Tim Hardaway Jr.'s role in some senses being more akin to where Porter was, where it's like, oh, crap, there's 5 seconds left on the shot clock. What do we do? Give it to the guy who shoots. Like, that's some of the shots Hardaway Jr. was getting on Saturday and has gotten so far in his Nuggets tenure. And it seems like more so than Porter, Hardaway Jr. is akin to hitting those shots. He is more likely to hit those. We have nothing else to do but to get this ball up. And I think that's something that really frustrated Nuggets fans is even me, like I will admit as a Porter guy, is he didn't hit the big shots. Like he just hit shots throughout the course of the game that didn't really have a ton of impact. And yes, he definitely hit some big shots. He was with the Nuggets for a long time, but consistently he didn't really hit the big shots. It was always Jokic and Murray, right? Hardaway Jr. is already hitting some really big shots, whether they're stopping a run, whether they're continuing a run and making them force a timeout. Like those shots Hardaway Jr. is hitting are having like real impacts on the game.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think with respect to Michael Porter Jr., like he was such a rhythm shooter that it's like if he would see his first 3-point shot go in, odds are he was going to heat up for the rest of the game and, you know, put up big points for the Denver Nuggets. Now, the inverse of that is if he started slow, it's probably a nice cold night for him from beyond the arc. And the difference with Tim Hardaway Jr. is, you know, coming off the bench or even with this elevated role, still coming off the bench, of course, with Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon out, is he's a true, just tried and true professional basketball player. And I know that's a generic term, but a guy that understands his role and is always ready for the moment. And I think that's exactly what is benefiting this Denver Nuggets team, because we talked about Jonas Valanciunas with the rebounding. That's a great addition for the Denver Nuggets, minus Michael Porter Jr. in that category. And if anything, you're getting stabilization with the bench unit led by Tim Hardaway Jr. right now, which ultimately I think is going to bode well for Denver the rest of the way in the regular season, but in particular in the playoffs, the opportunity to kind of take away or limit that boom or bust nature of this Nuggets offense. We always know about the bench discrepancy the last handful of years with Nikola Jokic and co. Tim Hardaway Jr. can be that stabilizing force for this Nuggets bench, and you saw that play out over the weekend.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys I mentioned earlier, whether it would be Will Barton or Bones Highland, those guys I wouldn't say were stabilizing forces.
No.
They were kind of, if you got them, it was, wow, this is awesome. It's an avalanche. Yeah, it's a heat check. And speaking of which, there's only one player in the NBA this season who've hit more threes off the bench in a game than Tim Hardaway Jr. And it's heat check, Vic Krejci. I don't know if you know that. That's his nickname.
Oh.
Best nickname in basketball right now. The Czechia forward, Vic Krejci, heat check. Love it. He's hit 8 in a game early on this season. But that leads me to, you know, that stabilizing force, Anilo, which is a perfect way of putting this. In the Nikola Jokic era, Tim Hardaway Jr. is already 5th in points per game very early on in the season, but 5th in points per game by average in players off the bench. Will Barton, 15-16 early on in his career, 14 a game. Will Barton, 16 and 17 the following year. He was 13.5 a game. Bones Highland, 22-23 the championship season, was 12 a game. Jeremy Grant, before the bubble that season, he was not starting. Most people don't remember that until the bubble, he wasn't starting. He was 12 a game off the bench. And Tim Hardaway Jr. right now is 12 a game off the bench. Those are some of the most influential Nuggets, I would say, of the last 5 to 10 years. And like you said, AP, Will Barton, I wouldn't necessarily say was a stabilizing force, but he certainly was more stabilizing than a lot of the names we've mentioned so far. And Jeremy Grant was a stabilizing force. He just left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So I look at what Tim Hardaway Jr. has done, and he gives you that ability to rise and be a player that just completely floods a team and takes over a team like we saw Saturday night. But what he's offering the Nuggets on a consistent basis has been so important, and it's showing up in the numbers of the overarching season as well. Everyone's talked about, you know, the Nuggets need to increase their three-point shooting. They need to have a different shot diet. Well, last year they shot the 30th most threes in the NBA at 31.5. They're up to 34.5 threes per game, which doesn't sound like a huge increase, but that jumps them to 23rd. And I said on this podcast going into the season, I don't need to see the Nuggets finish like 10th in three-point shooting. I need to see them somewhere between like 15th and 20th, because they are going to be one of the most efficient twos teams because of Nikola Jokic. So if they continue to kind of just creep up along that 20th in the league three-point shooting mark, I think that really changes everything for the Nuggets. And again, that's all starting with Tim Hardaway.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just been an injection off the bench that we haven't really seen in a long time for this Denver Nuggets team, right? You talk about Will Barton, but that is like a completely different era. And even Jeremy Grant, right? Like that was kind of the start of what we now know as this dominant Denver Nuggets team. Now, Julian Strawther has that skill set, as you alluded to, one of those guys that's hit those amount of threes off the bench for Denver in recent memory, but we still haven't seen that consistently from him. And I know we're talking about Tim Hardaway Jr., and he's been stellar, but the three-point shooting across the board for Denver as of late has been sharp. I mean, Jamal Murray scoring, not just with the 3-point shot, he's averaging just under 25 points a game. He's dialed in right now, shooting just over 40% from three. And in the last 4 games, a guy that you and I have spent a lot of time on this season is Cam Johnson. I mean, he puts up, 20 points against Sacramento, 18 against Memphis, 28 against San Antonio, 16 against Phoenix. But the common thread between all of those 4 games, he's shooting 50% or better from beyond the arc. 3 for 6 against Phoenix, 6 of 9 against San Antonio, 3 or 4 against Memphis, and 4 of 7 against Sacramento. So again, you're seeing everything kind of come together. Tim Hardaway Jr., a catalyst in that game against Phoenix, but the totality of the work has been encouraging for Denver to get to that middle mark for the 3-point shooting.
And this is why we were waiting till at least now, but most likely right around Christmas, because the 2 guys that the first few weeks of the season, everyone was like, one's struggling and one should stop taking threes.
Right.
Cameron Johnson and Nikola Jokic, right? Nikola Jokic now is shooting 45% from 3 on the year, which is, I think, would lead the league. I haven't even checked.
Oh
but
my gosh.
That's unbelievably historic. And Cameron Johnson, after Saturday's game, is now shooting 41% on the year from 3. And he was like at 29% for the first couple weeks. So.
Yeah, to use the Aaron Rodgers-ism, RELAX, right? Like, I understand why Nuggets fans were a little frustrated and, a little tumultuous to start the year. Take a chill pill, tranquilo. It's going to be okay.
And part of this is all because, again, Christian and Aaron are out and guys are having to step up. One of those people that has stepped up has been Spencer Jones, who, in my opinion, has already earned a full-time roster spot with his contributions. There's, a couple different ways that the Nuggets would need to be able to get this done, but they have an open roster spot. They're right up against the luxury tax. Our friend on social media, NBA Chicken, did a really solid article on this. I retweeted it at my Twitter at Shapalicious if you're looking for it, about like how the dynamics of how the Nuggets would get Spencer Jones on the roster. But Spencer Jones, through this season so far, has played 15 games, has started 4. You wouldn't notice it because he's only averaging 3 points per game, and he's shooting pretty efficiently, not taking many shots, and they've been mostly left wide open. But as a connector, which is something the Nuggets haven't had besides really Vlatko Čančar and then to a very extreme all-star level Aaron Gordon, he is a very good connector, as well as the fact that he's just hustling his butt off on defense and causing problems. And when the Nuggets are down their 2 top defensive players, he's given David Adelman at least a real option there. So I've really liked what I've seen out of Spencer Jones so far, and I just wanted to give him some praise.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's played his way to a contract. Like, I agree with you completely, and we'll see what Denver ends up doing here. And I know it's not necessarily apples to apples because he was hurt last year, but, this is a guy in Spencer Jones who's getting run ahead of De'Ron Holmes, right, who was a first-round pick for this Denver Nuggets team. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing with respect to De'Ron. I think he needs to up his game and just get back to playing shape after missing the entirety of his rookie season due to the injury. But like this, like you and I were talking about, like, key members for the Nuggets in the offseason, who's going to make an impact. I can't even lie to you, Jake. The name Spencer Jones didn't even cross my mind. Like, media day, didn't even think about it. Haven't even thought about it. And then he's like checking into these games. And I'm like, okay, I'm liking what I'm seeing. So that's a credit to Spencer Jones. It's also a credit to David Adelman for recognizing what he's been doing in the gym during practice and rewarding him with those minutes in the regular season. And it's paid off so far. So tip of the cap to Spencer Jones making the most of his opportunities.
Yeah, let alone earning it. He's probably had to earn it 10 times more than any other guy because where his status is as an undrafted 2A guy. So he has definitely earned what he has been given and continues to, should be given more. Just to put a bow on all this, the last little stretch, Friday, they play the Spurs. They lose to the Spurs again. The Champagnes, man, like, that is like the ultimate Nuggets killer. Like, I don't know if these guys just like see the Nuggets in their sleep and like want to kill them. Like, both of the brothers, like, they just murder the Nuggets every time they play. And they're good players. Like, they're solid players, but like, they don't do what they do against other teams to like they do against the Nuggets, which is just a crazy thing. That Spurs team was without their MVP candidate, Victor Wembanyama, and without the reigning Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle. That Spurs team is very scary, Anilo, with De'Aaron Fox, who has been one of the better players the last decade in the NBA, coupled with Ron Harper's son, who is just one of the top picks in the draft. He looks great. They've got that big tandem kind of coming off the bench with, Kornet and Olynyk. They've got so many different options, and it's one of the things we've touted with the Nuggets is the optionality. They've got Devin Vassell, who I've liked for a while as just a shooter, and he buried the Nuggets in this game. Keldon Johnson, former Olympian for Team USA, and he's just one of these forwards that he's kind of like DeMar DeRozan JV. Like, I really like Keldon Johnson, have for a while. He's just a really good basketball player. So they've got all these, and I didn't even mention Jeremy Sohan, who did an incredible job bothering Nikola Jokic and kind of making him not want to shoot in that game and forcing it out of his hands. So they've got all these guys. And again, I think they're probably a year away from really being able to beat the Nuggets or the Thunder. But on a given night, you can see how the identity of this team can really bug the Nuggets. And I don't know that their game plan is something that's going to be translatable to the other teams, but it did certainly raise some alarm bells with the way the Nuggets went down Friday night.
Yeah, and there was a lot to unpack from that game, right? They've lost now 3 consecutive games at home. We'll see if they could right that ship here tonight against the Dallas Mavericks. I think we all expect that they will, but pretty disheartening from the Nuggets in that game against San Antonio, just because of what you alluded to. No Wemby and no Stephon Castle. And look, San Antonio, you and I have talked about it time and time again on this show that, like, their time is coming, which is why I think there's so much urgency about this season for the Denver Nuggets to go out there and get the job done. And look, I understand they're down Christian Brown and down Aaron Gordon. Giving up 139 points at home, Jake, is just completely unacceptable.
So now, they hadn't allowed 40 points in a quarter until the first quarter of that game. Worst quarter the Nuggets have had all season. And then in the third quarter, they allowed 44. So they had their 2 worst defensive quarters of the season in the same game.
Yeah, and look, it's the NBA. You know, I'm not necessarily reading into this loss as like a big red flag, right? I think the Nuggets are going to be fine. Sometimes games like this happen. It's just the nature of the beast and whatnot. But I want to go back to the point that you and I brought up to you, I don't know, maybe at the beginning of the season or maybe in one of our pregame shows. I understand they beat Phoenix then on the second night of the back-to-back, but with the home streak, right? This is kind of like the first, on top of the injuries, the first little dose of adversity that we're seeing how David Adelman is choosing to handle, right? And again, we both think that they're going to take care of business tonight against Dallas, but just something to monitor about. Can they snap this streak? Should they do it handedly? You know, that's the expectation here tonight against Dallas, but definitely something to monitor here moving forward.
Yeah, they've been killer on the road lately. They've won 7 straight on the road.
Yeah, it's great.
And that's nails. And
they also haven't really played anybody yet. Like, that's the thing, is like you and I were all hyped up for this Wembanyama game. He didn't play. So it's like I'm looking at this 14-5 record and I'm like, okay, I like what I'm seeing. Didn't like what I saw against San Antonio, minus 2 of their best players, but we still haven't had that true gut check game for the Denver Nuggets. So they've done exactly what they're supposed to do, but they haven't really been tested yet. Not that that makes me uneasy, but I'm still kind of in wait and see mode to see if this team is going to live up to those championship expectations that both you and I have.
Yeah, and they played Houston in that other NBA Cup game.
True.
That was telling. But again, both teams were without guys, but that's just going to be the nature of the beast for a while here is teams are going to be without guys. If you look at the Nuggets' upcoming schedule, only 5 of their next 12 are at home. So if there was ever a time for a home losing streak, it was now, because in a road winning streak, it's now. But yeah, they play Dallas tonight. They're 12-point favorites in this game. Lively, Davis, Washington, Gafford, and Williams are on the injury report for them. So that could go any sort of way. I'm excited to see Cooper Flagg play for the first time in person. That's something I'll be watching tonight. You've got a little East Coast swing finished up with the game against the Kings because the NBA schedule is just bizarre. So Pacers, Hawks, Hornets, Kings coming up for you. But I do think that the Nuggets have won a couple games maybe that they shouldn't have won and lost a couple games that they shouldn't have. And their record is about where it should be. And I think people are getting a little bit cool on the Nuggets just because of their recent stretch. It's been a little bit rougher, but it's honestly not that surprising given the fact that they're down 2 starters right now. So I think if they continue to just float around 500 or a little bit above it until one of those guys comes back, it's going to be okay in the long term. So can they go out and beat a really bad Dallas team? Totally. Can they go out into the road and beat an Indiana team who I think has won like 2 or 3 games? Totally. They won 4 games. Atlanta on Friday night, I think, is a really cool game because Atlanta plays a different style of ball. For those who do not know, who haven't seen them play without Trae Young early on in this NBA season, Jalen Johnson, pace, defense, size, athleticism, a really fun team to watch. One of my favorites so far. That is going to be a very good game on Friday. So we might learn something in that game. Then they play a Charlotte Hornets team on Sunday, who is just a disaster. And then a Thursday night game against the Kings, who we know have been a disaster. So I think going into that Spurs game, the disappointment is Wemby didn't play. You had 5 days off or 3 days off, whatever it was. You had multiple days off. You end up losing it. But this stretch, which is against really bad teams besides Atlanta, and finishes up with a Monday game against Houston Rockets at home, which is the game in lieu of the NBA Cup. I think this is a stretch where the Nuggets can go back and say, yeah, the team we've been for the last week or two is not the team we are. It's the team you saw early on this season, but clearly we're going to have to work some ways around it just because of the injuries. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. has been a big part of that just because they've been reforming who they are. They've had to be more of an offensively led team here the last few weeks by, forcibly, not by decision.
No, 100%. And, the other thing that we're looking for with this Denver Nuggets team, and this isn't a surprise, is keeping pace in the West, right? I mean, Oklahoma City only has one loss on the year. They're 20-1. Shea's not playing fourth quarters, but the Lakers have been great, 15-4. The Rockets have been sharp, 13-4. Obviously, the Nuggets at 14-5. San Antonio at 13-6. I mean, all top 8 teams right now in the NBA's Western Conference have double-digit wins. Golden State at the bottom of that list, 11-10. And then you kind of draw the line with Memphis, who's been a disaster, Portland, among some other things as well. So I know it's very early in the year, but it's also a matter of let's snip this in the butt so we can keep pace and try to solidify this, top seed or top 2 seed in the Western Conference come the springtime.
Yeah, there's only 3 seeds I would want in the playoffs, realistically, because Oklahoma City, I'm just giving the 1 seed. It's 2, 3, or 6. And with 6, you don't really get to control that, and you're also on the road, so it's the least preferable of those.
Right.
You saw last year with it coming down to the final day of the season, like 6 is almost completely out of your control. But 2 or 3, you can kind of manipulate your way into a little bit, as we saw Michael Malone do one time, to the chagrin of almost everyone on this station. But you can control it. So I do think that's a worthy point out, AP, is the standings don't really matter yet, but it is worth just kind of being in that ballpark of chasing 2, chasing 3, so you can control it a little bit. And as of now, even though the Nuggets are 3 games behind the Thunder, technically speaking, they control their own destiny because they have 4 games against the Thunder. So I'm not saying the Nuggets are going for the 1 seed, but the Broncos weren't going for the 1 seed, and we know where they are now. He's Anilo Piro. I'm Jake Shapiro. We'll be back on Thursday with something for you. Maybe it's that little quarter season wrap up for you. We'll get something a little bit more overarching, and we'll be talking about this Nuggets road trip that they're on. Thanks for tuning in to the Mile